الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا مولانا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا Muhammad. This is Sayyida Nafisa Seminary's very first course trailer entitled The Beginning School. Our course catalog is linked under this lesson. In Greta Gerwig's Little Women, Meg Marsh attends a debutante ball. A night of chandeliers, laughter, and borrowed silk. Momentarily, she is enchanted by a world that seems grander than her own. For a fleeting moment, she believes she belongs. But beneath the glitter lies something hollow, a performance masquerading as worth. When Laurie sees the ridicule and artificiality of that world, the illusion shatters, and Meg realizes that the price of belonging is her dignity. She walks away from polish and prestige to live a life of love, integrity, and principle. That move is more than literature. It is an allegory for the modern self. That choice between performance and purpose frames the very question at the heart of our course entitled The Beginning School. From the 17th to the 19th centuries, Europe's finishing schools trained young women for society. They mastered posture, etiquette, and eloquence, not for truth or wisdom, but for presentation and the male gaze. Refinement meant conformity. Education meant rehearsal. The aim was not to cultivate substance, but to craft an image fit for display. Before even learning what it means to be a human being, they were indoctrinated in what it means to be an object. Such schools reinforced social stratification and gender subordination. And although those institutions have faded, their spirit endures, refashioned through the algorithmic empire of the digital age. From salons of silk to seminars on self-confidence, the performance persisted, a lineage of illusion stretching from corsets to content, from ballrooms to brand deals. Yet those schools, though gone, have not vanished. They have simply been digitized. The lineage of illusion extends. Today's algorithmic empire has reimagined the finishing school as the social feed. We now debut not in salons, but on screens. Our worth is not whispered in parlors, but measured in metrics: likes, views, engagement rates. Social media has become the new finishing school of the digital age, and we have all become its pupils. It lives in our palms and feeds on our attention. This is the age of the digital debutante, a symbolic figure of the modern self. Her gown is trending, her audience is the algorithm, her applause are the metrics of visibility. What once revolved around aristocratic presentation has now rebranded as self-marketing. Here, identity is curated for algorithmic approval. Visibility replaces virtue. The audience becomes the arbiter of worth. The algorithm is the instructor. The digital debutante has been carefully trained to perform for a gaze unseen, yet always watching. In this algorithmic empire, we become both subjects and soldiers, shaping ourselves into images that keep the empire alive. Even spirituality is rebranded, adorned with hashtags and filters. The human realm of the unseen is no longer the site of spiritual intelligence, but the colony of artificial surveillance. A master born of its own slave. يَوْمَ تَلِدُ الْأَمَةُ رَبَّتَهَا. This is the imperial Iblis. It is no longer a European colonizer, but a planetary power that rules through allure. Its weapons are not armies, but aesthetics, not bayonets, but branding. The platform economy enriches our pockets, even as it pillages our souls. It colonizes attention, fragments identity, and monetizes desire. In this sense, social media is not merely a technology. It is a theology of visibility. It invites the self to worship the gaze of others. And in doing so, it redefines virtue as virality, humility as invisibility, and worth as measurable engagement. Within Muslim communities, this performance has taken on its own accent. Influencer culture, modest fashion branding, and even discussions of marriage have absorbed the logic of the digital debutante. The marketplace of visibility has infiltrated even our most sacred spheres. We now speak of the high-value woman and status matching as if worth could be algorithmically certified. Dating apps stand as the quintessential expression of this transformation, the perfect finishing school ballroom redesigned for the screen. Profiles replace introductions. Swipes replace sincerity. We are invited to curate ourselves for selection, to advertise intimacy as commodity. The high-value archetype, polished, performative, and possibly pious, emerges as the spiritual descendant of the debutante. And beneath it all lies the same crisis, the loss of the fitra, the teleology of the soul, its innate orientation toward truth and sincerity. This is halalatronics, faith-flavored consumerism, content and lifestyle branding that borrows the language of faith while preserving the machinery of vanity. The result is that even the sacred has learned to sell itself. Islamicized consumerism, where devotion becomes display and piety becomes either political or performance or both. The imperial Iblis is the digital and ideological empire that conquers not through coercion, but through seduction. It sustains domination through aesthetics, algorithms, and illusions of choice. It no longer seeks to colonize our lands. It colonizes our longings. It extracts not natural resources, but attention, not labor, but identity. It is the conquest of soul, not soil. Behind all of this lies a spiritual crisis, the displacement of the fitra, our divinely oriented nature. Where the fitra seeks truth, the feed seeks trends. Where the soul yearns for sincerity, the algorithm rewards spectacle. And so we learn to polish the self for the world's gaze while neglecting the gaze of God. The algorithmic empire is the new finishing school, grooming the global subject for constant self-presentation. And we, like Meg at the ball, must eventually ask, at what cost do we belong? Our course, The Beginning School, poses that very question. It invites us to trace how refinement became performance, how identity became image, and how the empire of aesthetics continues to shape our souls. To understand the digital debutante is to recognize our own complicity and to begin the work of disentanglement. The Beginning School invites us to pause the performance. It traces the lineage from the European finishing school to the influencer economy, revealing how the same choreography of class and image now governs digital life. And how what once was a world polarized by the colonizer-settler dichotomy now finds sinful solidarity in the imperial Iblis. But more than just critique, our course offers a path of recovery for anyone, Muslim or otherwise, who sees through the facade and longs to live a life of purpose, to cultivate humanity rather than image, to build relationships of depth rather than display, and to improve spiritually, not artificially. The Beginning School is the conceptual inversion of the Eurocentric model of the finishing school. Yes, that horrid place that Enola Holmes's brother sought to force her into. A school of polish and pretense designed to silence brilliance in favor of obedience. A place where curiosity was a defect, independence a disorder, and charm a currency of control. It was a choreography of compliance, a finishing of the mind before it could ever begin. Yet standing in quiet defiance of that system was Eudora Holmes, a mother of fierce tenderness and intellectual rebellion. She raised her daughter not to be presented, but to be prepared, not to perform in society, but to improve it. Her lessons, like Marmy's in Little Women, were whispered acts of resistance, teaching their daughters to think, to feel, and to serve truth, to be humanly intelligent instead of artificially so. Where the finishing school trained women to mirror, these mothers taught them to see. Where society demanded grace as disguise, they modeled grace as strength. Both Marmi and Eudora built beginning schools within their own homes, sanctuaries of sincerity in a world obsessed with semblance. They taught their daughters not to doubt themselves until validated, but to know themselves so well that no need for external reference remains. It is a lesson that even our sons need today. This distinction between finishing and formation is where our journey begins. The beginning school is different. It is not about producing refined images, but refined souls. Not about prizing the mirror of the ego, but seeking the echo of the heart. It replaces the choreography of class with the cultivation of character. Where the finishing school teaches polish, the beginning school cultivates purity. It is not the art of presentation, but the science of formation. Unlike the debutantes of European high society or their digital descendants, the March sisters of Little Women were raised not in salons of status, but in the humble warmth of their mother's home. Marmi did not instruct them in the etiquette of appearances, but in the ethics of living. Hers was the pedagogy of sincerity, the motherly school. And this, in its essence, mirrors the prophetic school of tarbiyah. Formation that begins with intention, not image, with the heart, not the hashtag, with love, not lewdness. Somewhere between our screens and our souls, we've lost the grammar that once held us together. We've forgotten how to fall in love and why, how to form friendships and on what basis to build them, how to show compassion and care without letting them come at the expense of truth. We've forgotten how to really see another person beyond the pixels and personas. And now we look to fantasy to teach us how. Social media, which promised connection, has instead fractured our capacity for it. We meet more, but connect less. We perform affection rather than practice it. The personal dignity that once anchored relationships has again become the price of social standing, just as it was for Meg March and Enola Holmes. Two women, very different, with one thing in common. They were, ironically, real. Today, characters and stories feel more real than the people we meet. And that is the tragedy of our time. The birth of ethical sophism from moral relativism. A culture fluent in false empathy, illiterate in formative ethics. To restore our humanity, we must first restore our moral grammar. For it is to the soul what syntax is to speech, the structure that makes meaning possible. And without it, we cannot speak rightly, live rightly, or love rightly. To recover our moral grammar is to reclaim the self from the empire of illusion, to step out of the algorithmic ballroom and begin once again to live with meaning. It is precisely this syntax of the soul that the Quran teaches, and that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ embodied in the most beautiful of ways. This is the Tarbawi Tafsir. وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. In the prophetic model of tarbiyah, education is an act of nurturing. It shapes intellect, emotion, and spirit together toward the divine purpose embedded in our fitrah, the teleology of our souls, our innate, God-oriented nature that seeks truth, beauty, and balance instinctively. Refinement here is not the art of impressing others, but the discipline of aligning with the divine gaze. Not the male gaze, not the market gaze, not the algorithmic gaze, the gaze of God. This is what we call prophetic aesthetics. Beauty as moral harmony, grace as the outward echo of inward virtue. Where the world teaches that elegance is display, the Prophet teaches that elegance is divine. Sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sallam. In the beginning school, the path of formation belongs to both men and women alike. Men too must learn moral grammar, the knowledge of care and comportment, the art of dignified humility and disciplined strength, the adab of connection, and the singular courage to step out of the illusion and be real. Even if only to teach Enola's arrogant brother how to follow suit. In our story, men of true intelligence may just learn how to crack a woman's code. The game is afoot, but in the beginning school, the matter is not so elementary, my dear Watson. In our seminary framework, this journey begins at what we call the N-level pedagogy. Here, in seeking true refinement of the soul, unlearning precedes learning. Before we seek to know, we must first cleanse how we perceive. Before we seek to know, for when knowledge enters a distorted vessel, it only magnifies distortion. But when it enters a purified heart, it becomes light. The beginning school therefore calls us to rebuild our moral grammar and to rediscover adab, the harmony between behavior and belief. To learn adab is to learn how beauty behaves, sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sallam. It is the ethical and aesthetic discipline of comportment, the visible form of inner grace. But this model is not for Muslims alone, any more than the appreciation of an excellent mother is strictly geared toward one faith, or the imperial Iblis distinguishes between his dunyawi subjects. The beginning school speaks to anyone who feels that our age of digital abundance has come at the cost of spiritual poverty. Anyone who longs to live meaningfully rather than perform endlessly. Anyone who wishes to build relationships based on dignity, respect, and compassion rather than algorithms of approval. Anyone who agrees that we must recover presence in an era addicted to presentation. Against the creed of the digital debutante, the beginning school stands as the counter-curriculum. It trains the soul to recognize the machinery of manipulation and reclaim the freedom of the fitrah. It calls for refined relatability, a way of engaging the world not through consumption or comparison, but through contemplation and moral resonance. It teaches us to read the world through spiritual subtext, to see meaning beneath the visible, to sense the moral beneath the material. It invites us to awaken a spiritual intelligence far superior than its false, artificial counterpart. The fitrah knows its telos. Ultimately, it calls us not to reach an audience, but a state of being, the highest expression of human refinement, where intellect, emotion, and spirit are harmonized under prophetic example. Prophetic par excellence, sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sallam. The beginning school is not a nostalgic return. It is a spiritual renewal. It reclaims formation as a sacred process of becoming, moving us from the algorithmic empire to spiritual sovereignty, from distraction to devotion, from self-consciousness to God-consciousness, from the empire's polish to the prophet's path. Sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sallam. So in a world of digital debutantes, performers of identity, the beginning school calls us to become persons of integrity. Because the ultimate purpose of knowledge is not to embellish the self, but to initiate the soul. Because in the end, the true debut is not before society, but before the divine. Thus the truly intelligent prepare for their entrance. وَقُلْ رَبِّي أَدْخِلْنِي مُدْخَلَ صِدْقٍ وَأَخْرِجْنِي مُخْرَجَ صِدْقٍ وَاجْعَلْ لِي مِنْ لَدُنْكَ سُلْطَانًا نَصِيرًا. Welcome to the beginning school. Pre-registration is now open. Create your login to access courses as soon as they are released. Visit nafisa.org and follow us on Instagram at Nafisa Seminary. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد نور الأنوار وسر الأسرار وترياق الأغيار ومفتاح باب اليسار سيدنا محمد المختار وآله الأطهار وأصحابه الأخيار عدد نعم الله وإفضاله والحمد لله رب العالمين.